Hi, everyone, and welcome to Ask the Expert. I'm Catherine Rose. I am the founder and CEO of Wise Her. We provide on demand expert advice to help business owners and professionals accelerate their business or career growth. Our nearly 1,000 experts from around the world support those with affordable one on one advice to help them go farther faster in their business or career. And today I am excited to have with me on this Funding Friday angel investor, award-winning marketing educator, mentor, and author, Debi Kleiman, who will share some things about her fund and tips from her book, First Pitch. You can see that, First Pitch, Winning Money Mentors, and more for your startup. So welcome, Debi. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm excited to be here. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. So tell us a little bit more about yourself and kind of what led you to write the book.
Sure. I spent a long time at Babson College running the entrepreneurship center there. And even before that, I was very deeply involved in startups, working in and with startups, probably for almost 20 years now. Yeesh. And I have a real passion for working with early stage startups. So over and over and over and over again, I would see early stage entrepreneurs or first time entrepreneurs really struggle with their pitch. And the truth is that the pitch is really how you communicate about your startup. It's kind of the basic thing that you really have to do well in order to get people excited about your business. And so it wasn't one of those things that like, if you're not good at it, so what? It was one of those things that like, you got to be good at it and you got to enjoy it because you're going to do it every single day of your startup. So I really, after watching people pitch all the time, I was able to sort of see a pattern of what really good pitches did and what really bad pitches did. And so I wanted to write all that down and put it in one place because it didn't seem like there was just one place that covered all the elements of pitching, the process, the deck, the relationships, the follow-up, everything. I wanted to put it in one place. And so that's why I wrote it.
No, that's great. I've been really enjoying it, because I'm on my fundraising journey right now. And it is I've been in sales my whole career. So, pitching and doing demos and all those kind of things come second nature. But I think there is an element there when it's your baby, right? When you're selling for someone else, it's one thing. But when it's your own thing, I think talk a little bit about like how you may be able to get out of your own head when it's your own thing.
Well, I mean, part of that is just practicing a lot so that you don't feel all that emotion every time you're talking about your business. It's very easy to, not want somebody to tell you your baby's ugly, but all that feedback that you get is so important. You need to find a way to get it. So I think a lot of times when people practice a lot, they get so good at their pitch that it just kind of comes out of them like breathing. It becomes very natural. So they're not really thinking about every little thing as like a personal thing. They're looking at it more as like, okay, this is my business and this feedback's really valuable. I'm going to learn something. So you're looking at it as a learning experience rather than, feeling defensive.
Well, and I think, as an investor, right? So you're sitting on kind of the other side of the table. And so talk a little bit about how you became an investor and, as an early stage investor, even what even more should we, make sure that we put into these pitches to get that early stage investment dollars?
Sure. So for me, I became an investor as just sort of a natural outgrowth of my work working with founders. I work with so many great founders that I love, and investing in them just sort of became another way to support them and to share in the journey with them. So for a long time, I was a mentor and an advisor, and I would be invested through my sweat equity, and then I really decided that I wanted to put more into it, and then also help other people who don't know a lot about the startup community, but perhaps want to get involved or learn about startups, also invest in the startup community. So I started a small fund that would allow new people, new investors to learn about startups, help startups, and invest in startups in taking baby steps into getting into that world. So a lot of the people that I invest with are people that haven't invested before, don't know a lot about the startup community. So it's been a great way for them to get involved and to take a very, very successful career that they may have had in corporate or another field and, point all that expertise towards helping startups along with some money.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think and as when I was earlier stage, I mean, now we're at a different place, but when I was earlier stage, I know that there was a lot of times where I just wanted to know, how it's much easier to pitch when you have revenue, right? When you have, I mean, it's easier relatively, I guess. But it makes it a little bit easier when you have customers and you have revenue.
Mhm.
When you talk about early stage investing, because there's a lot of folks watching that have very early companies or even just thinking about putting an idea out there. Can you give them some advice on, how to validate their early ideas so that they don't end up in a pitch session with an investor and don't have all those boxes checked?
Great question. So, one of the most important things you can be doing with your time in the earliest parts of your venture are doing all kinds of like mini experiments. So, trying to very manually accomplish what you want the problem you want to solve without having to build a product or spend a lot of money on creating some new technology. How can you very manually go in and see if your idea actually solves the problem? And so what happens is you do a whole bunch of these experiments, you learn about what people want, what they don't want. People are very understanding when you're sort of setting it up as, this is my beginning, I'm trying to learn. So they don't mind as much that things may not work quite right already. And that way it'll allow you that when you're really ready to build a product, you can build something that people really want. I see so many times where entrepreneurs will like say they need a ton of money, I got to go build a product, I need a ton of money, I need to get going. The truth is that that's completely backwards. What you need to do is to take the lightest weight approach to your technology and just really understand, is the way you want to solve the problem going to work? Is it in the format that people want to have it in? Is it accessible? Does it reduce friction? All those kinds of things, and verify some of your hypotheses so that when you go to talk about your startup, you can say, I showed a mock-up to 100 people, they told me this, or I made a minimum viable product on a no code platform and it allowed me to learn that.
Right.
And that's a really great way to just show that you're making progress on all the unknowns, because that's really what the funding journey is about, right? The most unknown is at the very beginning of the journey. So that's when people are sort of taking a flyer on you as the
Right.
founder and sort of saying, I'm excited about you more than anything else. And there are a lot of unknowns, and as you go further into the funnel and you de-risk that idea, you are de-risking the investment, and so people are more likely to give you money.
Got
So
it.
that whole process of de-risking is it's a whole set of experiments that you need to do.
Yeah, and I mean, in the women founder community on Facebook and a lot of the places that, I work with a lot of women entrepreneurs too, just because it's, I've been around for a little while. And one of the things I tell them is, come out from behind your computer, right? I mean, so many people are like, oh, can you fill out my survey? But, that's not really, it's not necessarily the most accurate data, right?
Absolutely. And you're so right about that. That was one of the things that the entrepreneurs I work with over time struggle with the most. This customer discovery part of the entrepreneurial process requires you to get out and talk to people about the problem, live in their shoes, understand, how their day goes and how this problem comes up and what do they use to solve it today. All that
Right.
stuff can't be found on the internet. It can't be found sitting behind your computer. You have to go out and to talk to people, and you can't lead them to the answer.
Right.
The worst way of doing customer discovery is saying, I created this thing, what do you
What
think?
do
Do
you
you want to
think?
buy this? Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's not
Yeah.
how it works, and you
Well, like
won't
you
get good
said,
data.
nobody wants to tell you your baby's ugly. And so I tell the story about when I first started, I went to every woman's meetup within like, because initially we were focused just on women and within like a 25-mile radius of Boston. And I said, I'm thinking about investing in this company because quite frankly, at early stages, you are investing in it, right?
Yeah, of
And
course.
what do you think? And so what that allowed me to do was get real feedback from people and get, they didn't feel like they were going to hurt my feelings. If anything, they were even more concerned about giving me any sort of negative feedback because they wanted to protect me from investing in something that, wasn't maybe quite right. And so for
Yeah.
me, it just proved that, we were on the right track because people loved it. And then, like you said, with the, you know, uh, getting sort of the validation early, people would message me on LinkedIn Messenger and say, hey, I hear you have an expert on pitching. Can you hook me up? And I would send them a little invoice and they would pay me. So I think those are the kinds of things that are really important to bring out, especially in the earliest of stages. But in your book, you talk about obviously the pitch is very important with storytelling. It's very
Sure.
important to get funding, but also it's also important to get it, to get that pitch right for advisors and different things like that. Is that true?
Yes. And that is why the subtitle of my book is Winning Money, Mentors, and More for Your Startup, because the pitch process isn't just about fundraising. There are lots of startups that never have to fundraise a dime. They're bootstrapped or they're revenue generating and they fund their growth through revenue. So you're going to be pitching every single day to all kinds of people, new employees, agencies you might bring on to tell you about their company, first customers, suppliers and partners. I worked with a startup who needed to renegotiate their terms with a supplier and a manufacturing partner. And so they
Interesting.
literally went in and they pitched them on the business and really told the story of what they were trying to accomplish to get that supplier partner on board with them to give them better terms, because they started to believe in the business and they saw what was in it for them besides just getting an invoice paid on time. So that pitch can move people to do lots of things for you if it's compelling and clear enough. And so that's why storytelling is so important, because storytelling creates an emotional connection. And
Right.
our brains are wired to remember stories. In fact, our brains listen differently to stories than they do to data or really dry presentation material. So when you're telling a story, people are leaning in, they're really curious, they want to know what's
Mm.
happening. And at the same time, if you're doing a good job telling your story, you're creating this emotional connection with your audience and they start to care about you and they want to help you as a result.
I think that's such an important thing, obviously, especially in the early stages too. And even later, I mean, I almost feel in some ways like I was better at telling my story when I first started. And the other day I went through my pitch again and I was like, wait a second, I'm way too far away from you know what I mean? The story
Yeah.
is because I see so many pitches, and probably you do as well, where they say their 30-second, elevator speech or whatever, and you're like, wait a second, what do you do? You know what I
Right.
mean? So give us some tips on that. Like, how do you set up the pitch in the beginning? Because I know you only have a few seconds, perhaps even, to catch someone's attention. How do you make sure that you set it up properly so at the end they're like, wait a second, what?
Well, we think that there's about 20 seconds of
Okay.
time that you have to really hook people. So 20 seconds isn't a lot of time, but by the same token, it is a lot of time in terms of being really convincing. You can light up people's eyes in 20 seconds. And I think one thing that people do that is they get caught up in is this idea that they have to tell everything about their startup. They have to like blurt the whole thing all over the place when they're first telling people about it. And you really don't. You just have to say enough to get people interested to ask the next question.
Okay.
So you start a conversation and you can tell them more about it, but that first 20 seconds needs to grab them. It needs to have some kind of hook. And so what you're really trying to capture in that first 20 seconds is literally like, what's the problem you're solving? How do you solve it? And who's it for? But telling it in such a way that it's really clear and concise and compelling.
Got it. Okay. And you recommend, kind of trial running it on certain people?
Oh, for sure. You have to practice that a million times before you feel really comfortable. It should be very natural coming out of you. It should be one of those things that you don't have to think about. You could tell it in the line at Starbucks. You could tell it in the line for the ladies' room. You could tell it to
Well, yeah,
someone
because you
sitting
never
next to you
know
on
when
the
you're going to have
airport.
to deliver it, right? You never
That's
know when
right.
you're going to have to deliver it. I mean, I'm
That's
one of
right.
those people. I mean, used to before COVID. I traveled a ton. I was probably on a plane like every week, and I would be sitting at the restaurant in Logan Airport or in Albuquerque or wherever I was, and usually there's a line waiting for people to get seats. And I would always say, hey, anybody want to sit with me? That's totally fine. And I can't tell you how many experts I met that way. I met potential funders that way. But,
Definitely.
and they're asking, so what do you do? And you want to make sure that, you're ready with that answer. So that's great to just continuously practice it and then try it out. And if you get that look probably like, what? Then, you know what I mean? Then maybe you're on the wrong track.
It's all great learning though, right? Every time you're going to learn something, what resonates, what doesn't resonate, where do people sort of spark to the idea. So it's great to practice it. It's great to have multiple versions of it so you can kind of adapt in the moment depending on who you're talking to, because sometimes you might tell a potential investor something a little different than you might tell like a new customer that you
Right.
want to sell on what you're doing. So it's good to have a couple versions of it. But either way, it has to be something that's really true to the business, but said so simply that anyone can understand it. No jargon, no fillers. Like every word has to matter and it has to count,
Okay.
so that it really lands with some impact.
Awesome. And in terms of approaching early stage investors, how would you recommend? I mean, obviously, people have to get their pitch down and understand those kinds of things, but approaching those folks, because those are the ones oftentimes are the hardest to find. I think. I mean, VC firms are all over the place, and angel networks you could probably find, but usually those early stage investors are the one-off angels and maybe people that, you might not necessarily know. So just give a little bit of an idea of how we could, approach those folks.
Well, we're lucky because we have the internet and you can find all kinds of things on the internet. So one way obviously is to just research your local ecosystem. So generally speaking, and this was probably more true before the pandemic than it is now, but generally speaking, angels and early stage funders tend to invest in sort of a radius that's around them, maybe 150-mile radius around them,
Okay.
because they really want to be involved in the startup in a significant way. Generally, they want to be useful and helpful to the startup, so they want to be close by. Now, I think the pandemic changed that a little bit, where people got more comfortable doing that kind of work online. But to start with, if you are looking for early stage funders, I always think it's best to look at your local ecosystem.
Okay.
Where are people going to entrepreneur events? Where are people going to pitch events? And those are the best places where you can see angels and people in the community who are going to fund early stage startups. They're at those events. They're speaking at those events. I think a lot of early investors have great Twitter profiles and great blogs
Oh,
on Medium. Those are both
okay.
really good places to look for people who want to talk about their expertise, or share how to raise money or meet people. Those are great places to find, people that aren't in your general area, I think. So you're going to just need to do a little bit of research and then also network, and networking is really important. Ask people in your community, who are the best angels, who are the best, most supportive mentors in the community. And a lot of it's going to depend on what industry you're working in, what
Right.
space you're working in, right? Because if you're playing your cards right, you're going to get smart money. You're going to get someone who's a real expert in your area. So work your way around that area, find out who is the best direct to consumer angel, who is the best
Right.
B2B enterprise SaaS person, where they have experience and connections and ways to help you beyond just money. And the internet's a great way to research that, read what people write, and then put yourself out there and go to events. And it's funny, a lot of entrepreneurs, like the early stage entrepreneurs who are first time entrepreneurs, say like, oh, I don't want to talk about my company, I'm in stealth mode. Well, that's ridiculous.
Thank
You
you for
have
saying
to
that. Thank you for saying that. Yeah.
you have to talk about your startup to anybody who will listen. Legit, like, talk to anyone who will listen about your startup. You're going to learn how to pitch it. You're going to learn what resonates, but you're also going to meet people who say, oh my God, you're doing that, I know someone who can help you. And then like connect the dots, like, all over the place. So never say your ideas in stealth and you don't want to talk about it, and never ever ask someone to sign an
An
NDA, because that
NDA.
is
Yeah.
ridiculous. Don't do
Yeah.
it.
Well, and I think too, I think so many people will say, well, I don't know necessarily. It's not all the time that, people are afraid to say it because someone will steal their idea, although I think there's a fair amount of that. But also too, I say to people, Google wasn't the first search engine. I mean, I was there. So I know that they weren't first, or
That's right.
Uber, Lyft was this number two, or whatever. So there are billions of people on the planet. There are plenty of opportunities for you to carve out your area. And as long as you do what you do well and you do it in a differentiated fashion, there's plenty right out there for everybody.
That's exactly right. And when I'm looking at, and when I'm evaluating an investment, an early stage investment, The things that I care about most are, what's this founder like? That sort of why now, why you set of
Yeah.
questions. That's easy to talk about if you don't need to be in stealth about that. Why you? Why now? What trends are you seeing come together that make this a really good idea for right now? Why is it going to work right now? So one of the one of the startups I worked with for a really, really long time, what we did in the early 2000s harnessed social media and people using social media. Now, if that company had come along, even just 5 or 6 years earlier, where everybody wasn't on Facebook and comfortable using social media, it would have failed. Even if social media existed, it had to get to a certain point of, spreading and people using it regularly for it to really work. So there's some timing reason, there's some trend reason. And then most importantly for me is I say, what's your unique insight about this problem? Like, do you have a unique perspective on this problem that tells me that you're going to win? And
Right.
I think it's a really important question that entrepreneurs need to be ready to answer for investors, because it'll tell me, A, how much you really know about this space. B, you're being thoughtful. You're in the know. You're listening to the trends. You're seeing things people don't see. Those make the great founders, right? And then you're trying to show other things about yourself. Again, has nothing to do with if your startup's in stealth or not. It's about you as a founder. Are you coachable? Will you bust through walls to make this thing happen? Are you emotionally resilient? Are you trustworthy? That's what I want to know.
Right.
The idea is great to know, and I definitely want to hear that. But those other founder characteristics are things that I'm looking for right away. And so the more you can sort of talk and project those kind of characteristics, that's going to be way more interesting to me and really engage me.
That's great advice. And I know in the book you talk a fair amount about women and people of color and, and the disparities that you see. And,
Yeah.
one of the things that if you bringing up team is this something that, I struggled with too, is that it's very challenging, I think, sometimes to find a number of people, because in the beginning, sometimes you're not paying yourself and you can't pay
Mm-hmm.
people. And so there's a lot of emphasis in the investment world about team. And if you are an early stage and you don't have, you're not in college and have 10 dorm buddies that want to, do something with you, what is your advice around that? Because it does get challenging, because one of the challenges for women and people of color and underrepresented founders is they don't have a deep bench of people to turn to. And so I think in some ways that's a challenge for us.
It is a challenge for sure. And I think and I would also say that if you can avoid being a solo founder, it's really hard. Founding a company is super hard. It's super lonely at times. If you can find a co-founder, even if it's later in the development, I would do it, because it makes such a difference. Of course, don't go into that relationship lightly, because the co-founder relationship is fraught with all kinds of hazards, and you have to make sure that there's great chemistry and trust and all those good things. But if you can avoid being a solo founder, you should. But in terms of finding teammates and people to work with you, I mean, again, I think a lot of it is just networking and being out there. I have a startup that I've worked with for a really long time, and she needed a CTO. She wasn't technical, but she had this great tech company idea. She needed a CTO. Those are the hardest to find. She had no money. She had no funding. And, she just networked her way to someone who was across the country from her. So they didn't, geography isn't a problem anymore, right?
Right.
So she got somebody engaged. She pitched him on her idea, her passion. He was sold on her and his belief that she could pull this off. And again, this is where your pitch comes in, right?
Yeah.
He was sold on her and her passion and his belief that she could do this. So he started off slow with her. He did a couple projects for her, sort of like not like a consultant, but just very distinct projects so they could see how they work together and to see if they, really meshed. And he was willing to do those small projects and willing to invest that amount of time to get to know her and to know how they work together, because then later he became her co-founder, because they, found that they worked really well together and he got further bought into it. So sometimes it's just, taking small bits to work on together and, not thinking like, oh, I have to go ahead and hire this full-time person right away. working with people on as contractors for a little while. Sometimes you'll find people who have full-time jobs who will do that kind of thing with you, smaller projects with you. And then when they're really engaged, they'll quit their full-time job and then they'll come on full-time.
Right.
So don't be afraid to ask a full person who has a full-time job that you really want to work with to see if they will do a side project with you, because lots of times people get very excited about working with entrepreneurs.
That's a great idea. Yeah, because I think, people do get intimidated. And also, again, in the early stages, you can't really pay people, you're putting all the money into the product or whatever. And so you need to be able to find the right people. And I think obviously the pitch is, a really important part of it. One of the things you also bring up is about, when you're in the pitch. So you have a really great things in the book about getting to those storytelling pieces. But when you're actually in the pitch, again, particularly for women and people of color, that there is a this idea of promotion versus prevention questions. And as someone who's pitched a lot and heard a lot of these, I just wanted to, I love that part of the book because, I'd love to get just your take on the difference between those types of questions, and then how we might be able to kind of flip the script when we get those different kinds of questions.
Yeah. So that promotion versus prevention language, that comes from a Columbia Business School research study that was done by a set of professors there who looked at how venture capitalists interact with entrepreneurs in the pitch. And the research looked at, and unfortunately, there is bias in the pitch process. For women and people of color, there is a lot of bias still in this whole entrepreneurship world. We see this in the data, right? They're getting funded at such a smaller rate than white males. So that's a fact of life. We have to deal with it. We have to be prepared. So this research said, prevention questions are questions about like staving off risk, managing risk, staving off doom, very kind of negative focused questions. And promotion questions are about growth and opportunity and like how great this opportunity is. And so what they found in their research was that entrepreneurs that got asked prevention questions, whether or not it was a male or a female venture capitalist asking the question, tended to give a prevention answer. And so when you give a prevention answer, right, you're talking about managing risk, and it's kind of like a downer. It's not as exciting if you're not able to kind of tell the story in a really exciting way. When you're asked a promotion question, you give a promotion answer. Right. And what they found was that people who get asked promotion questions raise 7 times more money than people who get asked prevention questions. And then it turns out also that mostly women and people of color get asked prevention questions and white males get asked promotion questions. So what kind of question you get asked matters because it depends on your answer, and your answer matters because that depends on how much you will be able to raise. Yeah.
Can you give us an example? Sure. Give us an example of a promotion versus a prevention question.
Sure. I mean, you got to be on the lookout for these things. My philosophy around this is, I call it spot it and switch it. So you have to sort of start to be able to recognize a prevention question when it's coming at you, answer it very quickly, and then quickly move on to a promotion answer. So something like if you're asked, like, how are you going to defend market share, right? That's a very different question than how big is this market? So how big is this market is a promotion question, right? You're allowed to talk about growth and how exciting this opportunity is. How are you going to defend market share is a prevention question, right? It's staving off doom. It's mitigating risk. So maybe what you say is something really quickly, like we're confident we can double our market share by incorporating this really valuable seniors market. We also think that there's an incredible opportunity with these distribution partners, and we know that the growth market in Canada is also a hugely attractive opportunity for us, right? So I've answered the question. I've sort of said, I'm going to really focus on, the seniors market, or I'm going to focus on a new product introduction, but then I'm going to go in and make the answer bigger. I'm going to make it more of a promotion question. So it's not just about that defending my market share. It's about how am I going to grow my market in total?
Yeah. I mean, I think how we hear it a lot now is what's your moat? And I'm like, I don't really see this as a stronghold that I'm going to put knights around, but but I think that's a prevention question. Yes.
It is. It definitely is. Another way people put it is like, how is this idea defensible?
Okay.
It's definitely a prevention question. And so, just answer it really quickly in terms of what you think your competitive differentiation is, but then, talk about why you think this opportunity is so massive. And a lot of times, women and people of color have unique insights
Yeah.
that other people don't have. And so the idea is to really emphasize why your differentiation as a woman or a person of color actually matters and will be an advantage
Got
to
it.
winning. And why that your unique perspective is actually going to allow this thing to take off.
Fantastic. Well, I wanted to mention something that I read in the book too. You kind of, you go beyond the actual content. So you talk about that. You talk about answering these kinds of questions, but you also go beyond it a little bit more about, kind of what you should wear and your tone of voice and how you, hold your hands. I think those are really important things to incorporate. So can you just talk a little bit about those?
Sure. Everything matters when you're pitching. You're being judged by your appearance. You're being judged by how neat your slides are. You're being judged if you have typos in your slides. You're being judged if your tone of voice is either too soft or too loud. So it's important to just watch all of those things and try and tape yourself, record yourself, so that you can sort of see, maybe you do weird things with your hands when you pitch. Maybe you toss your head too much. Maybe you don't make direct eye contact. Those things are fixable. It's all fixable, but you just have to know that it's there and be self-aware. So it's important to know how you're coming across in a presentation. It's also important that you manage things like typos in your slide deck. Like, you
Right.
might think that that's not a big deal, but it is, because it says something about you. If you have a typo in your slide deck, that says to me as an investor, you don't care. You're
Right.
not thorough. You're not detail oriented.
Mhm.
So all those little things are cues to me about you. And, that may or may not be true, but that's what it's saying to me as an investor. So you want to watch those things. You want to, if you show up sloppily dressed, or you show up, not looking professional, and it doesn't mean wear a suit or anything like that. It just means,
Right.
present yourself in your best light possible, while still being your authentic self. But remember that everything that you're doing and saying is saying something about you as the entrepreneur. And you want to come across as thoughtful. You want to come across as professional. You want to come across as confident.
Right. Oh, that's great. That's great. And I know we only have a few minutes left. So, but one of my favorite parts is because, obviously being in sales most of my career, one of the biggest, places people the process can fall apart is on the follow up. So you've
Mm.
gone through the pitch process, you found these different investors, people wanted to hear what you said, and you were very specific in your book about calling out, the follow up piece of it. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure. The follow up piece is so important. Ultimately, I want people to think about the pitch process as building relationships. It's not just merely like, here's the deck, I'm going to present it, and we're done. This is the beginning of a relationship you're having. So whether or not an investor invests in you right then and there, it doesn't matter, because now you have a relationship. You've met them. They may come back later around in some way to help you in some completely other way, or they may come back and invest in you later when they feel more confident in the opportunity, or for whatever other external reason that has nothing to do with you.
Right.
So using the pitch process as an opportunity to build a relationship is so important. And part of that comes down to follow up. You've pitched. Now you need to, in the Q&A part of your pitch, when you sort of go into a conversation, you're answering questions, you want to come across as really coachable, that you're interested, you're actively listening, you're taking notes.
Got it.
If people ask you a question, you don't know the answer, it's okay to say you don't know the answer. I'd rather you tell me you don't know the answer right now, and I'll get back to you, after this. And the I'll get back to you is actually an awesome opportunity to email them afterwards and start up another conversation.
Right.
So using all those, both body cues and verbal cues, that you are listening, that you're engaged with the feedback, that's really important. And then the follow up is like, thank you for that feedback, being really specific. You told me to reach out to this person. Yes, I did reach out to that person, and it was super helpful. Thank you so much. making sure that they know that you heard what they said, you valued it. Doesn't mean you always have to do everything that somebody tells you to do. Like, I think entrepreneurs get really caught up in like, I'm getting feedback from all over the place and I don't
Yeah.
know what to listen to.
Yeah.
That's your job as an entrepreneur to figure that out. You are going to get all kinds of advice and some of it's going to conflict. That's your job as an entrepreneur to figure it out. At the end of the day, it's your business. But that doesn't mean that you don't value every single piece of feedback that you get. Doesn't mean you don't follow up with every single person you talk to. What I advise is that start to create a database of everybody that you talk to about your business. It can be on an Excel sheet, or you can do something a little bit more like a CRM. It doesn't matter. But once you start collecting all those names over time and all those emails, you can start sending out a quarterly newsletter or a quarterly email that sort of says, here's where we're at, here's what we accomplished, here's where we're going, and here are my asks. And those asks are really important because they change, obviously, and you never know who's going to come around to help you. And it's such a simple thing. It's just it's a really, it's a 4-paragraph email or 4 bullet sections of information. And most people would love to hear from you. I must get, 25 quarterly emails every quarter from people I've met who are working on things that I think are interesting. And I may not have invested in them, but if they have an ask in their quarterly update that I can help with, I will absolutely reach back out and help them. So it's good to create that network, keep it close, and reach out to people and ask for help. Generally speaking, people love to help entrepreneurs.
I agree. I think that, I do this talk called The Power of Ask, and it talks about like, if you don't ask, you don't get. And most people, even, the research bears it out that most people do want to help.
Yeah,
so don't be afraid to ask, but the keeping in touch is really important. Okay.
Yeah. And be organized about it. I think one of the things about the investment process is that people are disorganized, and it's so important to be very organized.
That's great. Great advice. So we are at the end, but I did want to just thank you very much for joining us today. And also just wanted to kind of get, your top tips, what to keep in mind to have a great first pitch.
Well, certainly, what I just said, be organized, be ready, make sure that your process is well thought out. I think be open to feedback, really important. Talk yourself down out of that, that feeling that you don't want people to criticize you, and be really open and remember it's a learning experience. I think being authentic and being yourself is really important. Don't try to be something that you're not, because if they do start a relationship with you, it's going to come out that you are not that person.
Yeah.
So you might as well be authentic from the start, and that helps to build a lot of trust. I think, again, creating relationships is how you should think about it. And relationship building is just so important in this entrepreneurship community. It's actually pretty small. People know each other. Be helpful. That was something I forgot to mention, but like, be helpful to other people. Even though you're the entrepreneur, you're out looking for money, or you're out starting a business, be helpful to other people. Always end every meeting and say, what can I do for you?
Yeah.
Offer to help other people. It's so important, and it really comes back in spades to you. And then I think lastly, just practice, practice everything a million times, so that it just feels really natural for you to be talking about your business in a clear and compelling way.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again, Debi, for joining us today. Debi is an expert on WiseHer, so we're going to put her information in the chat. So if you want to schedule a call with her to discuss her book, and also any further questions you have about early stage investing, I'm sure she'd love to hear from you. If you want to purchase her book, oh wait, hold on, let me see if I can pull it back up on. Oh, it's in the background there too, so you have it. First pitch. You want to hold it up for everyone too? First pitch. Yay. So yeah, it's on Amazon, and it's, you'll do well to get it. It's a really good guide for folks, and very comprehensive. And again, it's not just about raising money, right? It's about getting investors, but also advisors, mentors, and pretty much anyone that you would want to help you. People don't have to mentor you, right? They could just help you get the word out and things like that. So
it could be the press. It could be
that's true.
Anybody that's willing to talk to you.
Anyone that's willing to, exactly. Okay, great. Thank you so much again. And join us in 2 weeks for Get Wise Wednesday, August 11th. We're going to talk to Radhika Dutt about her product creation strategy, radical product thinking, and how to develop products that are led by the vision for change it's intended to create. And if you want to keep up with us on the Go Ask the Expert, make sure you go to goasktheexpert.com and get on our list. So until next time, thank you. And thank you again, Debbie, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Catherine.
Bye.
Bye.